Good morning. The scripture today is 1 Peter 2:12. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We have a somewhat short sermon for you this morning. I crack myself up sometimes. We're talking about Zacchaeus, who was not a great tall man. Now it finally clicks. I've been waiting for that joke. I love that joke, but I hate that joke. It's so corny, but it's just, one of those things that just kind of makes you feel like life is worthwhile. Happy you're here to hear a preacher have a corny joke. I mean, isn't that what life's all about? If that's it, folks, I'm sorry. Transformational generosity. Now, in preparation for this sermon talking about Zacchaeus and the short amount of lines we have in relation to who he is and his impact on the ministry of Jesus, the Messiah, I got to tell you, there's some conflicting information out there. Now, there's kind of one or two ways that you could look at the conversation that Jesus has with Zacchaeus. We're going over to Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10 for our content today. And as we read through this, to me, it's always read a particular way. And the places I normally go for information, some different thoughts, some different information for background and preparation for a sermon, there's two ways to look at the story or the narrative of Zacchaeus, and I had never even considered the first way. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's quite right. And I'll explain why as we go through the text, but I'm going to present this material to you the way that I think it's best presented when it comes to the content of the actual material. And I know this is a bit vague for you right now. It's going to click in just a moment, hopefully, because the tenses used in the language make me believe a certain thing about Zacchaeus and his character, which other commentators seem to not find there. So, having said all that, I'm going to walk you through the material, the text itself, and then I'll explain to you the two perspectives about Zacchaeus and his character and let you decide what you want to do with it, all right? Is that fair enough? You don't have a choice, so here we go. Luke chapter 19, beginning in verse 1. It's talking about the ministry of Jesus. He entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Now, just some fun facts for you. I know we all love fun facts, don't we? If you don't, you're about to. You ready? Here we go. This phraseology, the title of chief tax collector, this is the only time that word is used in the entire New Testament. We don't know what that means. We don't know if it's the idea that he was the main one for the entire city of Jericho, or if he was the main one that all the other tax collectors reported to. Jericho was a port city. It was kind of a hub, if you will, of trade. So it might be just because he was in Jericho, he was considered a chief or a tax collector that had some kind of esteem. But the fact is, here in the text, verse 2, part B, he was rich. He was wealthy. And usually, those two things go hand in hand. Verse 3, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was a short king. Verse 4. Oh, I'm sorry. He was small in stature. That was just for Blaine. I thought he might appreciate that. Do the kids still say that or no? They don't say it anymore? Well, I'm trying here, folks. Verse 4. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Verse 5. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because I must stay at your house today. Now that in and of itself is a somewhat interesting interaction. Normally you have Jesus passing through a town, and people that are sick or that have possession by demons, they come to Jesus and they have a request, and they humbly ask him to, if it be his will, to cure them or to heal them or to cast out these demons. Here you've got Jesus walking through the city street, and he looks up and there's a guy. And they don't have an interaction before this, so I would imagine that either he is so well known in this town that he heard about this Zacchaeus guy, and he has to look up in the tree to see him, or, of course, Jesus being Jesus, would know exactly who Zacchaeus is hanging out in the tree trying to observe him walking through Jericho. Now, the next section is where we kind of get a little bit tricky when it comes to your interpretation. Again, I've got my own feelings about this. You can disagree with me, and you can be wrong. That's okay. We can be divided on this. Okay, verse 6. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. Well, yeah. I mean, if you were Zacchaeus, you're trying to see Jesus, and you got a house, and Jesus says, I need to stay at your place today. Is that all right with you? He goes, yeah, of course. Come stay with me. He has more face time with this Jesus guy. Verse 7. Here's a new introduction to the narrative. When they saw it, the powerful they, meaning others that were in Jericho that knew who Jesus was, it would seem, and they knew exactly who Zacchaeus was, or at least they thought they did, they had a problem with this interaction. Because they always do, don't they? Whenever Jesus would go into a house and he would eat with sinners, they had a problem with it. Because it said, you are supposed to be the most holy of holy, God's Son. Who are you to be dining with people that are sinners, that are outcasts from society? Folks that we wouldn't even look at if we're passing on the same side of the street. And you're eating with them, sharing this fellowship with these sinful people. They had a problem with it. That's how I read it. And they all grumbled, as they always do, folks. And here's the grumble. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who's a sinner. I mean, they were also sinners, weren't they? But here they are, putting Zacchaeus in a whole other kind of category of sinner because they're not as bad as he was. Verse 8, Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, because Zacchaeus heard them. Now, if you look at the text here, this is the tense situation, the grammar, where it kind of, I follow into one camp because it doesn't quite fit the other camp. And so if you know anything about language whatsoever, all of these tenses here are present active indicative. So the idea here is this is a thing that is currently going on. It's not future tense, meaning these things will go on in the future. They're present tense because they currently are going on. That's why you have two different camps of interpretation here. And here's the thing I'm talking about. Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. Again, present active indicative is the idea of this is what I'm already doing, not what I will do. Because in certain interpretations, when you look at this passage, some people are of the conviction that this is Zacchaeus having a change of heart that results in a change of action. He's repenting because Jesus called him and asked to stay in his house, and therefore he's turning his ways away from sin and towards righteousness in this very moment. It doesn't read that way, though. It seems like he's already been doing this, but they don't know about it. So I give away half my goods to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it, present active indicative, not future tense. I restore it fourfold. So was Zacchaeus a chief tax collector, whatever that means? Yes. Was he rich or wealthy? Yes. But is it because he was a tax collector who was taking what did not belong to him or from the Romans, from his kinsmen in Jericho? That seems not to be the case. unless he's lying to Jesus here, he did not defraud anyone. He gives away his goods to help those that are in need. He is a generous giver, even though he's wealthy. Now, they don't know that because they're assuming about his character that he's just one of those tax collectors who just takes more than he's required to become wealthy in and of himself by taking from his brethren in Jericho. In verse 9, this is telling, verse 9, and Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham." He's one of us, is what he's saying. Verse 10, you have this famous line tacked onto the end of this narrative. For, or because, verse 10, the Son of Man, which is Isaiah's favorite way to talk about this Messiah, the Son of Man, came to seek and to save the lost. Now, when you look at this story, again, I don't see a great transformation taking place here on the part of Zacchaeus. I don't see him defrauding people and stealing people's wealth. And then as soon as Jesus calls him and says he wants to stay in his house, a great transformation occurs. I think what's taking place in this text is that Zacchaeus is standing up for his own character, his own decision-making, his own process. He's saying, listen, they have an assumption about how I achieve my wealth. And fair enough. But I'm not taking more than was required from the Roman government. And I'm not taking from my brethren and defrauding them. I restore what I can to those that are in need. And if I've wronged someone, I restore it 4 times the amount that I'm accused of defrauding them. This seems to be a righteous individual. And not so righteous that he's sinless before a holy God, but still a good person that the crowd, the people, have assumptions about. That's how I read it. A couple of lessons from this short little story. I can't do it. It's so funny. It's so funny to me. I don't know why. This short text, oh man, okay. Here's some thoughts that we can pull away from this. There's verses 1 through 4 of our narrative. We see that seeking Jesus we see that, Vicky, help me. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Seeking Jesus despite the misunderstanding, verses 1 through 4. Zacchaeus was literally able to overcome the physical and the social obstacles to see the Lord. Now, we don't know what he knew about Jesus, but at least the people recognized that there was something important going on when Jesus passed through the town. His persistence of even climbing up a tree to get eyes on Jesus shows a man whose conscience is clear, but whose heart still desires to know the Lord. We don't see him shying away and hiding away from the Son of Man. He's here trying to behold him through these actions. A couple of verses that come to mind when we think about this. In Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 10, right in the middle of this context here, a simple note. I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give to every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. Now, for those that know Jesus and that walk after him and follow him, are doing good works to glorify our Father in heaven, this is good news, because the Lord knows in our hearts and in our minds what we've done to glorify him. But to someone who has something to hide from God, I got some news for you. You can't hide it, because that's who God is. He knows us better than we know ourselves sometimes. In Psalm 26, verses 1 and 2, we see the psalmist say these words, "Vindicate me, O Lord, because I have walked in my integrity. I have trusted in the Lord without wavering. Prove me or test me, O God, and try me. Test my heart and my mind." This is a person who knows what's on the inside is good. It's not perfect, but it's good. It's after God's ways. It's righteous. And he wants that validation from God himself. I see Zacchaeus being kind of like that. He was a tax collector. But again, so was the author of the gospel according to Matthew. I wonder what that dinner was like. When they're having dinner together in Zacchaeus' house, and Matthew and Zacchaeus are talking shop. Can you imagine that? I mean, I just want to be a fly on the wall. Not a mud dauber flying around the church building, but I want to be a fly on the wall to kind of see that conversation take place. Not only that, a way to look at these first 4 verses and see some possible application for you. Even when we live uprightly, people, they can sometimes misjudge us. Have you ever had people make assumptions about you? I mean, my job being what it is, I've got some wild stories that I would love to tell you, but I'm not gonna. Do you, being someone who has assumptions made about you and your character, press in to see Jesus, or do you hide in hurt and resentment? Resentment's one of those things, right? You drink the poison, hoping the other person gets ill. Right? That's resentment. Keep seeking the Lord, folks, even when you feel unfairly labeled by others. Zacchaeus could have just stayed in his house and threw a pity party about what they thought about him, but instead he climbed that tree because he wanted to see Jesus. We also see in our context here, verses 5 through 7, that Jesus' call overrules the crowd's judgment. I mean, they're talking about a guy being a sinner when they themselves are, guess what? Sinners. I mean, we're all in the same boat. We like to categorize and put people in different camps of how bad their sins are. That's not how the Lord sees people. He's come to seek and save the lost, of which we have Zacchaeus, but of which we have the crowd as well. Jesus calls Zacchaeus by name, which is a public act of honor in front of a somewhat hostile audience. The crowd's grumbling shows them they have already condemned him. They've already thought about the chief tax collector being a rich guy, taking money from his kinsmen. They've already got an opinion about who he is. But Jesus disregards that public opinion to affirm the personal worth and dignity of this man. Some passages that come to mind. Luke chapter 7, verse 34, we see the same exact situation we find in Luke 19 of Jesus going to eat with a sinner in Zacchaeus' house, taking place in chapter 7 of the same book. Luke 7:34, the Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by all her children. The irony here is this wisdom that we're talking about in this context has a direct connection to the wisdom of the Lord from the book of Proverbs. We have the literal logos, word of God, wisdom of God, sitting here teaching people wisdom, and we have the so-called wise guys, Pharisees and Sadducees, claiming hostile things about the Son of Man in this context. So no surprise that he calls a sinner to eat with, because Jesus had to eat with sinners because they were all sinners, folks, and so are we. In 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, passage I go to often to kind of remind me of this truth, the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance, talking about the sons of Jesse, or the sons of Jesse, but on their height or of stature, because I've rejected him. For the Lord sees not as a man sees, but man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. It's got all these tall, handsome sons of Jesse, and there's this low, apparently shorter than his brothers, David guy out in the field taking care of his father's sheep, and that's the king that God chose. Some ways to think about an application for this particular context of 5 through 7. Jesus' opinion for or of us is not determined by gossip or social stigma. We see him going to the outcast of the outcast, and calling them because they're humble enough to receive him for who he really was. If we look out into the world today, even to our congregation today, the folks that Jesus has called are people that are humble, not people that have all their needs and wants met and they're comfortable and they're doing just fine. We have people that are sometimes emotionally broken by life, and they come to the source of the way, the truth, and the life to receive the information of the gospel from Jesus himself. Also in verse 8 of our context, we have the integrity of Zacchaeus displayed. We see a defense of his normal practice, not a promise of future reform. That's not how I see it anyway. He says, I give half my goods to the poor, which is a habitual act of generosity. He even says, I restore fourfold, which seemed to be his standard practice for resolution if wrong was done. We see him defending himself before them in the crowd by saying, you don't know exactly how far I go to make restitution. His integrity paired with his proactive generosity shines here in verse 8 of our text. A couple of verses that connect these themes together, Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. How often do you go to Micah, by the way? Not often? Well, at least once today. How about that? Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God, which Zacchaeus was attempting to do here in this very text. We even see the fact that Paul, making a defense of himself before trial at the end of Acts 24, says these words. Acts 24:16, Paul says, so I always take pains to have a clear conscience towards both God and man. Paul went out of his way to try to do the right thing. So did, in my estimation, did Zacchaeus in Luke 19. He went out of his way to make sure things were on the up and up. A couple of things to consider about application from verse 8. Living generously is a lifestyle, not a momentary response to guilt. Now, I know we're going through a capital campaign. Did you know that? I know that. And I know we've been talking about the idea of raising funds from the congregation to help expand the auditorium to be more comfortable for people that we have joining us and to see us grow as God has blessed us. Our desire to give monetarily towards that campaign or to any need that we see in the congregation should not be from guilt. Don't let anyone guilt trip you into giving, saying that you're not a good person, you're not a good Christian if you don't. We all stand before God open, transparent. He sees what's on our hearts and our minds and even in our wallets, because He blessed our wallets to begin with. We have to be full of integrity, looking to God and saying, listen, I know how much you blessed me with, and then make our own determinations about how to be generous for the capital campaign and for every need that we come across in the world. The Lord is working through us, and through the gifts He's given to us, to bless our society, our community, and even our congregation. And then, almost finally, verses 9 and 10. Jesus declares that salvation has come to His house, affirming that Zacchaeus is a true son of Abraham, quote unquote, in the spiritual sense. He's following after the call that Abraham originally got. He's standing before the imminent kingdom of God that's to be established here on the earth, and He's inviting him to join that kingdom, to be a part of that kingdom work, to seek and to save the lost, sometimes mean even vindicating those that have been assumed about, talked about behind their backs. A couple of verses. Romans chapter 2 and verses 28 and 29, we see Paul affirm this, being Jewish, for no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter, his praise is not from man, but from God. We see that we are called the children of God after Abraham, not because of who our parents were, grandparents were, great-grandparents were, but how we are on the inside. Psalm 37, verses 5 and 6, the psalmist says, "Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday." We should know that God may use us as examples to correct false cultural assumptions, as in the case of Luke chapter 19. And your generosity and integrity may be noticed by the Lord, even if misunderstood by others. If I can leave you with something this morning from this short sermon, you got to do it. Zacchaeus' story reminds us that not all who are judged by society are guilty before God. Jesus knows the truth about our hearts and will vindicate his people. We're being challenged to live with integrity, to give generously, and trust God to defend our reputation in his timing. I mean, to me, 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter hit the nail on the head. Verse 12, "Keep your conduct, your manner of life, the way that you live in this life among the Gentiles honorable, so that when those that speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God." Folks, the things that people have to say about us behind our backs is none of our business. I was told that line once, and I thought, you know what, it's not that bad. And it stuck with me. The Lord knows who I am, right and wrong. And if I do my best to follow after him and to live in the way that he would have me to live, everything's going to work out. So as we're considering Zacchaeus, the situation in which he found himself in a society, in a context where people despised his profession and made assumptions about who he was, you have Jesus come along and defend him and call him the perfect recipient to receive the information of the good news of Jesus Christ from his own mouth. This morning, the gospel is yours. Walk with integrity. Live as the way that God would have you to live, because he knows us better than we know ourselves. If you have a need to respond this morning, you can see one of our elders at the door, or you can come forward and talk to me or Blaine. We can pray for you right now. If you have a need, please come forward while we stand and we sing.